Hi, this is the TCR100.com website quick video guide for the TCR100. In this, we've inserted our SIM card into the router, connected the power, and we've connected with an Ethernet cable to the router. Make sure you use port 1, as out of the box, port 2 is configured as the WAN port and will not give your PC an IP address. We're going to cover things like manually configuring your APN settings. We're going to be using a fixed IP SIM card, which will require the manual configuration. If you're using a standard network SIM, it's likely that the router will automatically connect to EE or Vodafone with the built-in settings. But if it doesn't, we're going to show you where to manually configure your APN settings, change your LAN settings, so just in case you don't want to use the 192.168.1 subnet. And because we're using a fixed IP SIM card, I can show you port forwarding and remote access to the router. We'll also cover off things like ping reboot, which is the feature the router will use to monitor the internet connection, and when, not if, the mobile network disconnects the router, it can detect that and automatically reboot and re-establish the 4G connection. And that's a feature common with industrial type routers, which you get in this consumer unit. So we're just going to jump straight to it. Okay, so we connected to the router, we've opened up our web browser, and we put the IP address of the router in there, which is 192.168.1.1, and the default username is admin, and the password is different on every router, and that can be found on the sticker on the base of the router. So we've put that in and we log in. We'll do all of this real time so you can see how long everything takes. And the first thing it does is get us to set a new password. So for the sake of this, I'm just going to use TEST at 1234 and repeat TEST 123 TEST at 1234 and submit. It's going to ask you to use a capital letter in there, maybe a number and a symbol, just to keep it secure. Make sure you write your password down. If you forget your password, you're going to need to factory reset the router and start your configuration again. So the first thing it does, it comes up with an option of setup wizards. Now we're going to just ignore those for now, and that's going to show you how you can find things quicker afterwards. Now when it starts off, it starts you in basic mode. We're just going to switch to advanced. And the first thing we're going to do is configure the APN, because we want the router to connect to the internet, and we want to make sure before we start doing all the other configurations that the SIM's working and the router is connecting to the internet. So for that, we're going to go to network, and we can see here we've got mobile, general settings. You'd think it would be in there, but no. We're going to go to interfaces, and we can see the mobile interface here, and we're going to click on edit. So this is coming up with auto APN, so we're going to disable that, and now we can see here we can select from different APNs, but we're just going to have a custom. And for this SIM card, it's just WL-APN4.com. Check with your fixed IP SIM provider or your SIM provider what the particular APN is, and that's it. We save and apply. So we've now configured the APN. We can go to status, and we'll be able to see in the modem that you can see the EE network, SIM card's ready, but it's currently disconnected. And there we go. So that's now connected. So we'll obviously need to just check that. So to check it, we'll open up another web browser page. And in this case, I visited showmyip.co.uk, and this is my public IP. So I can now remotely access the router. In your case, you may be using a standard SIM card. Whilst it will show you a public IP there, you won't be able to access it because a standard EE or Vodafone SIM, for example, will use CGNAT, carrier grade NAT, which means you don't have the ability to remotely access your router or use features like port forwarding. So we've now confirmed we've got the APN incorrect, it's connected, and we can connect to a site on the internet. So back to the configuration of the router. So what we can do next is enable remote access to the router, because in the default settings it won't allow connection to the web management via the internet. So we're just going to go to System and Administration, and we can see here Access Control. So we can see here Enable Remote HTTP Access and Enable HTTPS. So that means we can just configure on remotely connect on 192.168.1.185 address, or we can go HTTPS and come in on port 4333. So in a lot of cases when the routers are being configured for port forwarding, for example for CCTV, they may want to just access on port 80. So we can change that to port 81, and that frees up port 80 for your port forwarding. So we've enabled that now, and we can save and apply. Now, because we've changed the web admin port to port 81, we'll see that we now need to reconnect to the router using 192.168.1.1:81. So that's port 81. So again, we're just going to put admin test at 1, 2, 3, 4. So every time now you want to connect to the router, you're just going to remember to put port 81 or 8080, whatever you've changed that to. Now we're going to look at changing the LAN. So obviously we're on 192.168.1.1. It may be that you want to use a different subnet. So again, we're going to go to Network and Interfaces, and we can see the LAN here. And we're just going to edit that. So let's say we want this to be on 192.168.3.1. So that's it really. So once we save that, it'll swap everything over, it'll readjust the DHCP. The router will, if we save and apply, I'll show you what happens. Obviously we'll no longer be able to connect to the router on 192.168.1. So if we just change that to .3 now, port 81, and you can see now we've changed the IP address of the router. And we can log in again. So under Network and Firewall, this is where we'll find our security settings. And for this, we're just going to go to port forwards. So we're going to assume that this might be for some sort of CCTV. So CCTV NVR. The external port is 80. So when we come on, we want to access the router remotely using that public IP address. We're not going to need to use any different ports. and then we'll just put in the internal IP address. So let's say the NVR is going to be 192.168.3.100, 100, and the internal port of the NVR is port 80 as well. And we add that first. You're not allowed spaces in there, see? And we add. And we never actually put our port in. So just a couple of things to watch out for. And we never typed our external port in there. It was I just assumed that the grey ones were there. There we go. And we can see that that's been set up now, and we can save and apply. So that's the port forwarding setup. Now, again, if you're going to be using this router for things like port forwarding, it may be that you're going to be away from the router. So you're going to need to set up your ping reboots. So to look for the ping reboots, you're going to go to Services and Auto Reboot. And we can see this is where our ping reboot is. We're going to edit that. We're going to turn it on first of all. We're going to edit, and we're going to enable. And basically it's going to ping. If it doesn't receive a response, it's going to reboot the router. We've got different options here, but we're going to go for device reboot. We're going to ping every 5 minutes. Most of these settings you can leave alone. And we're going to ping 8.8.8.8. So every 5 minutes it's going to ping that. It's going to try a couple of times. If it still doesn't get a response, it's going to reboot the router, and then that will re-establish the connection as a new device. So that's the ping reboot. And finally, we're just going to cover off the Wi-Fi. So if we go to network and wireless, we can see here we've got the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. So each can be configured individually. So just like most router Wi-Fis, we're just going to edit that. We can give it a new SSID, so we can call it TCR100 2, and we can put our wireless security in. We can change our password. So you can see the password is usually on the base of the router, but we can change that to something that may be a bit easier. So test at 1, 2, 3, 4. Save and apply. So when we're searching for this within our laptop or phone Wi-Fi, we'll now be able to connect using TCR100 with that password. And we can do the same for the 5 gig network. So TCR100 5 wireless security test at 1, 2, 3, 4. Save and apply. And that's the Wi-Fi. So in terms of setup, it's pretty easy. If you're not going to be using a fixed IP SIM card and you don't need remote access, you don't need to worry with the port forwarding and the remote access. But this video is just for general, so it covers the main uses of this type of router. Again, under status, you can see everything in here. You can see your mobile usage, which is pretty handy. So this is 7 o'clock in the morning. We can see the amount of data used in a day, a week, a month. So it's pretty good in terms of everything that you can see in the status settings. You've got plenty of other features in here, but a lot of them are sort of advanced industrial features that you may or may not use, but you can configure lots of different features, and we will cover some of those features in particular videos. If at the end you sort of realize that you've just want to reset and start again, then if you go to backup, so system and backup, you'll find the restore default settings here, and this will bring everything back to square one, and you can start your configuration again. So that's the TCR100 consumer router from Teltonika. I hope that's helped guide you through a couple of the things, especially if you're using a fixed IP SIM card. But generally, I think it's a pretty good router. The web interface is good, and it's a good looking unit. So enjoy.